Let's get busy. Let's do it tonight.
Marcus Thorne lived his life in right angles. As one of the city's most sought-after architects, his world was a curated collection of glass, steel, and calculated shadows. He preferred the silence of his Brooklyn loft, a space where every book was spine-aligned and every piece of furniture served a structural purpose. To Marcus, vulnerability was a structural flaw, a crack in the foundation that could lead to a total collapse. He had learned that lesson the hard way 7 years ago, and since then, his heart had been a construction site with a no trespassing sign permanently bolted to the gate. The rooftop fundraiser in Dumbo was exactly the kind of event Marcus usually navigated with surgical precision. Arrive, donate a significant check, exchange 3 minutes of pleasantries with the firm's partners, and exit before the networking turned into connection. But the rooftop was a chaotic symphony of clinking champagne flutes and humid New York wind. And then there was the man center stage. Elias Vance did not believe in right angles. He was a storm of organic curves and vibrant energy. While the rest of the donors wore tailored charcoal suits, Elias stood behind a folding table covered in Polaroid photos of community gardens and neighborhood kids, wearing a mustard yellow thrifted linen shirt and a crown of locks that shimmered under the string lights. You're staring at the soil samples, or are you actually interested in the South Harlem Green Initiative? Elias asked, his voice a rich baritone that seemed to vibrate in Marcus's chest. Marcus straightened his silk tie, his professional armor clicking into place. I was looking at the site map. Your drainage plan for the community greenhouse is ambitious, possibly inefficient for a plot that size. Elias laughed, a sound so genuine it felt out of place in the sterile crowd. Inefficient? Maybe, but it's built for the people who live there, not for a brochure. I'm Elias. Marcus Thorne, he replied, expecting the name to trigger the usual, the architect, response. It didn't. Elias just tilted his head, his eyes, the color of dark roast coffee, searching Marcus's face. Nice to meet you, Marcus. You look like a man who hasn't stepped in real dirt in a long time. You want to see the blueprints, or do you want to hear about the soul of the project? I'm an architect, Mr. Vance. Blueprints are the soul. Then you're missing half the building, Elias countered, a playful spark in his eyes. He leaned in closer, the scent of shea butter and something herbal, maybe rosemary, drifting over to Marcus. Tell you what, you write the check that keeps our irrigation system from failing, and I'll show you a side of the city that doesn't show up on your CAD software. Marcus felt a strange, terrifying pull. It was the first time in years he didn't want to leave a room. I'll write the check, but I expect a full walkthrough of the technical specs. Deal, Elias whispered, his hand brushing Marcus's sleeve as he reached for a flyer. The contact was brief, but Marcus felt the heat of it long after he'd retreated into the night. Their first date wasn't at a 5-star restaurant, despite Marcus's repeated attempts to make a reservation at Le Bernardin. Elias had countered with a text. No ties allowed. Meet me at the Blue Note at 11 p.m. Bring your ears, not your wallet. The Jazz Club was a subterranean sanctuary in Harlem, thick with the scent of old wood, bourbon, and history. They sat at a corner table so small their knees were forced to touch. Marcus felt a frantic urge to pull away, but the steady pressure of Elias's leg against his felt like an anchor. "My father used to play the horn," Marcus said, the confession slipping out before he could filter it. He rarely spoke of his family. His father, a rigid man who viewed Marcus's sexuality as a design error, was a ghost he tried not to summon. "Used to?" Elias asked softly, his eyes focused entirely on Marcus, ignoring the phenomenal trio on stage. "He passed away 3 years ago. We weren't on speaking terms. He thought my life was too abstract for his liking." Marcus looked down at his glass of neat scotch. He wanted a son who built houses for families like the ones in the commercials, not a man who builds glass boxes for billionaires. Elias reached across the table. He didn't grab Marcus's hand. He simply laid his palm open, an invitation. "My family is a lot. Sunday dinners with 3 generations of cousins screaming over each other. They're loud, they're messy, and they'd probably drive a man like you crazy. But they see me, Marcus, all of me. I decided a long time ago I wouldn't spend my life shrinking to fit into someone else's floor plan." Marcus looked at Elias's open palm. He felt the weight of his own secrets. The reason he had moved to New York. The reason he stayed in the glass loft. Slowly, he placed his hand in Elias's. Elias's skin was warm, his grip firm and grounding. "I don't know how to do loud and messy," Marcus admitted. "That's okay," Elias smiled. "I've got enough for both of us." 2 weeks later, the rain was relentless. Marcus found himself standing in the middle of a muddy lot in South Harlem, holding a heavy-duty umbrella over Elias as the younger man worked to secure a tarp over a shipment of new saplings. Marcus was wearing $2,000 boots that were currently sinking into the muck. By all accounts, he should have been miserable. Instead, he was mesmerized. Elias moved with a grace that Marcus usually reserved for structural lines. He was covered in dirt, his locks tied back with a piece of twine, laughing as the rain slicked his dark skin. "You're going to catch a cold," Marcus shouted over the downpour. "I'm fine. The plants need the drink," Elias yelled back. He stood up, wiping a streak of mud across his forehead. He looked at Marcus, perfectly dry under his expensive umbrella, looking like a misplaced statue. "Come here, Marcus. Help me with this knot." Marcus hesitated, then stepped into the thick of it. He dropped the umbrella, letting the rain soak through his cashmere sweater. He grabbed the edge of the heavy tarp, his hands fumbling with the rough rope. "Like this," Elias said, stepping behind him. He reached around Marcus, his chest pressing against Marcus's back, his hands guiding Marcus's fingers through the loop. The world narrowed down to the sound of the rain and the feel of Elias's breath against his neck. They were 2 black men in a city that often tried to make them invisible, creating something beautiful out of the dirt. "There," Elias whispered. "You're a natural." They stayed like that for a moment, soaked to the bone. Marcus turned in Elias's arms. The rain was dripping off Elias's nose, his eyes bright with a joy that Marcus found himself desperately wanting to inhabit. "I got you something," Marcus said, his voice husky. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, waterproof box. Inside was a high-end vintage compass he'd found at an estate sale. "To help you find your way when the garden gets too big." Elias looked at the gift, an expensive, thoughtful act of service. He looked back at Marcus, his expression softening into something like heartbreak. Marcus, it's beautiful, but you don't have to buy me things to make me stay. I know, Marcus said, his guard slipping for the first time. I just don't always have the words. Elias leaned in, kissing him. A slow, rain-tasting kiss that felt like a homecoming. It tasted of earth and possibility. The relationship moved like a slow-burning fire, warming the cold corners of Marcus's life. But the friction remained. It came to a head at the Whitney Museum's annual gala, where Marcus was being honored for his latest skyscraper design. Marcus was back in his element. Black tuxedo, champagne in hand, surrounded by the elite of the New York architectural world. Elias was by his side, wearing a suit made of African wax print fabric that stood out like a flame in a room of shadows. Marcus, darling, a partner from a rival firm, a woman named Cynthia with a smile as sharp as a scalpel, approached them. The building is a masterpiece, so cold, so disciplined, truly Thorne-esque. She turned her gaze to Elias, her smile turning patronizing. And who is your colorful companion? Marcus felt the familiar urge to minimize, to give a professional answer that shielded his private life. He felt the weight of the room, the expectations of the people who held his career in their hands. But then he felt Elias's hand graze his back, not a push, but a reminder. This is Elias Vance, Marcus said, his voice ringing out clearly, silencing the nearby conversations. He's a community organizer and the most brilliant person I know. He's currently teaching me that a building without a community is just a hollow shell. Cynthia's eyebrows shot up. How charming. A charity project? Marcus didn't blink. No, a partnership. And if my work is cold, Cynthia, it's only because I hadn't met the man who could set it on fire yet. Elias's hand gripped Marcus's tuxedo jacket, his fingers digging into the fabric. The pride in Elias's eyes was worth more than any award Marcus had ever won. Later that night, as they walked through the quiet streets toward Marcus's loft, the air was crisp. You didn't have to do that, Elias said softly. I know how much those people matter to your firm. They don't matter as much as you, Marcus replied. I've spent too long building walls, Elias. I'm tired of living inside them. They reached Marcus's loft just as the sun was beginning to dip below the Manhattan skyline, casting a golden-orange glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The light caught the cedar wood of the floors and the soft textures of the new plants Elias had insisted on bringing into the space. Elias had made jollof rice earlier that evening, the spicy tomato-based aroma filling the usually sterile air. They ate on the floor, the ceremony of the gala replaced by the intimacy of shared laughter and the shorthand of two people who had begun to weave their lives together. My mother would like you, Elias said, leaning his head on Marcus's shoulder. She'd tell you to eat more and stop overthinking your hair, but she'd like you. Marcus laughed, a deep, relaxed sound. He felt a surge of emotion so powerful, it felt like his heart was finally outgrowing the blueprint he'd drawn for it. He looked at Elias, this beautiful, soulful man who had forced him to look at the dirt and the rain and the loud parts of life. Elias, Marcus started, his voice trembling slightly. He set his plate aside and took both of Elias's hands. I spent a long time thinking that love was a liability, that if I let someone in, they'd find the parts of me that are broken and realize I'm not worth the upkeep. Marcus, Elias began, but Marcus shook his head. No, let me finish. I've spent 35 years being Marcus Thorne, the architect, but with you, I'm just Marcus, and for the first time in my life, that feels like enough. I wanted to tell you. Marcus leaned in, his forehead resting against Elias's. The words were right there, on the tip of his tongue. I love you. The 3 words he hadn't spoken to another human being in nearly a decade. Elias, Suddenly, the sharp, rhythmic sound of the loft's buzzer cut through the silence. Marcus stiffened. I'm not expecting anyone. Maybe it's the delivery you ordered? Elias suggested, though his eyes were wary. Marcus stood up, a strange cold dread settling in his stomach. He walked over to the intercom screen by the door. His breath hitched. On the grainy black and white monitor stood a man Marcus hadn't seen in 7 years. A man wearing a military-style jacket, looking older but unmistakably the same. Julian, the man who had left Marcus in ruins. The man who was the reason Marcus had built the walls in the first place. But Julian wasn't alone. He was holding the hand of a small boy, perhaps 6 years old, who had Marcus's exact jawline and the same distinct, deep-set eyes that stared back at Marcus every morning in the mirror. The boy looked up at the camera, and Julian spoke into the intercom, his voice muffled but clear enough to shatter the room. Marcus, I know I'm the last person you want to see, but he's getting older, and he's starting to ask questions. He deserves to know his father. The silence in the loft was deafening. Marcus didn't move. He couldn't breathe. He felt Elias step up behind him. He felt the warmth of Elias's presence, then the sudden sharp intake of breath as Elias looked at the screen, then back at Marcus. The secret Marcus had buried, the child he didn't know existed, the life he had fled from in a moment of cowardice and heartbreak, was standing at the door. Elias's eyes, usually so full of loud joy, were now wide with a devastating realization. The radical honesty he believed in had just been met with the ultimate silence. Marcus? Elias's voice was a whisper, cracking in the golden light of the sunset. Who is that? The buzzer rang again, louder this time, echoing through the hollow glass box of the loft.